It's time now to take a look at the state of the defense, and we will start with the state of the defensive line coming off of a rather rough season in year one under defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. They make a change at defensive line coach this offseason to Marcus Covington, the new defensive line coach for the Green Bay Packers. But other than that, we're running it back. No additions in the draft, at least meaningful additions in the draft until day 3. No free agent signings, no trade for Trey Hendrickson or TJ Watt. It's Rashawn Gary, it's Kenny Clark, it's Devontae Wyatt, who they picked up the 5th-year option on this offseason, and it's Lucas Van Ness. The state of the defensive line is a scary one, Gabriel.
Yeah, it's bad. It's not good. It's not good because you're paying your best pass rusher probably a little too much money because he just couldn't live up to the potential that he showed, and it's scary to think that the best he was coming so close off that ACL because he vaulted up the year coming off the ACL right on Thanksgiving. He had 9 sacks. 9 sacks. Mm-hmm. Then nothing the rest of the year that year. Last year he only ends up getting 8 sacks. Yes, he gets his first Pro Bowl nomination and nod, but he's not good enough. Kenny Clark, now we know there were some injury issues with him. He wasn't good enough. And Lucas Van Ness, he's been disappointing through 2 years. And I know that when they drafted him, much like Rashawn Gary, it was, okay, this guy has a lot of the physical tools that you need to be a really good pass rusher. He just didn't have the actual ability, and they were hoping they could coach that into him. And yes, I know he was dealing with a thumb injury, but there's no excuse to me for being a top 15 pick in this league and getting blocked on multiple occasions one-on-one by a tight end.
Yep.
And that happened a couple of times last year. In fact, he had as many sacks as Keyshawn Nixon had. They both had 3 last season, so I don't have a lot of hope for that group. I think they did a pretty good job against the run, which is something that we always harped on when Joe Barry was the defensive coordinator. I think that
without a doubt,
schematically switching to the 4-3 certainly helped, I think, in that area. But at the end of the day, the teams that are the best can get pressure with 4, and this group cannot do that.
Yeah, you saw what the Eagles were able to do against the Packers offense. There was an opportunity in that game with as rusty, which was part of the equation, that their quarterback was. The defense held the Eagles to 16 points for 3+ quarters of the game, but the Packers could not protect Love. They obviously had the injury to Elton Jenkins, but it is a game changer when you can get pressure with 4. It gives you so much more flexibility in the back end. But now, to Jeff Hafley's credit, and this is one of the storylines of the season, he figured out a way to be a really good defense in spite of not getting that. And the worst part of their sack numbers is that they're so misleading because they got so many of them in just a handful of games that they actually make it look like they had a decent year. They finished tied for 8th in actual number of sacks, but I think 9 were against Tennessee. They weren't good enough. And look, Rashawn Gary, whether it's fair or not, Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness, when you're picked 12th overall and 13th overall, when you get the $96 million contract that Rashawn Gary received then, if the expectations are higher for you. There's no 2 ways about it. And you can say, well, you can't just measure their impact by sacks. Nobody says that about Trey Hendrickson. Nobody says that about Myles Garrett. Nobody says that about TJ Watt.
How come the highest paid guys are the ones that have the most sacks?
Yeah. Well, not all of them.
Riddle me this.
And so, look, I think Rashawn Gary talked about his Pro Bowl nomination. Again, I'm sorry, but I don't see that as a legitimate measure of where he's at in terms of being a field tilting player, which is what they need him to be.
Rashawn Gary's good. He's a good player.
Yes, he's a good player.
But and this is something that Chewy talks about, and it's one of my favorite points he always makes when he's talking about football teams. In order to have a successful season, you need your A players to play like A players.
Bingo.
He's an A player. He is being paid and is being expected to be an A player.
And
realistically, he's a B player.
Yep.
Which is fine. Obviously you're going to have B players. You're not going to have A players everywhere. But when you're being paid to be an A player, you're expected to be an A player, and you play like a B player, now somebody else has to make up for that. And they haven't had anybody that's been able to do that.
On the interior, could this be Kenny Clark's last season as a Packer?
Oh, it absolutely could be. For sure. And look, Kenny did not say anything about his foot issue. He was on the injury report, but he always played, didn't miss a game.
Yep.
And again, Kenny, we love to tease Kenny. because he still hasn't celebrated his 30th birthday yet. But that is going to occur in, I believe, October.
Yep.
And what do we know about Goody and 30-year-old players? What do we know about Goody and third contracts? He got one of those because he was so young when he entered the league. But look, they need Devontae Wyatt to play like a first-round pick. And in fairness to Devontae Wyatt, he played like one for like the first 4 games, and he hurt his ankle
against the Vikings.
And he was just never the same player. And then he was finally starting to look like he was maybe recapturing that, and then their season ended in Philadelphia.
Yep.
So, he's another one of those. I talked earlier about this dozen or so guys. Him and Quay Walker, who I know we'll get to when we get to linebackers, those guys, in my little cheat code on my 20 most important Packers, I'm telling you right now, I put those two together because they both were first-round picks that are, in Quay's case, entering the final year of his contract, so he didn't get the fifth-year option. And in Devontae Wyatt's case, he wouldn't have gotten one either if it wasn't for his being far less expensive than what Quay Walker's was. So both of those guys, again, they have to do more. And I think that's almost the theme, Gabe, of this team, is that they got a lot of good players that have to be more than just how good they've been.
Bingo.
Yeah. And to me, Brian Gutekunst has done a good job of drafting really solid players. Like, really good, starters across the league, right? And even if you don't pay Sean Ryan, like, somebody else is going to pay Sean Ryan. Not the way that, Josh Myers got paid in a one-year deal. Someone's going to give, Ryan or
more like John Runyon.
Walker.
Yeah, he'll get starter money.
Yeah, so that's good. But you also need to have a bunch of good players don't win Super Bowls. And this has always been my big problem, and you need more stars.
And the Packers lack stars right now.
And when you have opportunities to draft as early as they did when they got Rashawn Gary, when they got Lucas Van Ness, I'm not saying you have to hit both of them because that's tough. But you got to hit one of them. And that's now you're chasing, right? Now you're going, they have to trade for T.J. Watt. Why aren't they calling, Cincinnati for Trey Hendrickson with an X? So it's a situation where you didn't hit those.
It's a niche joke, but a good one.
If you read Murphy Takes 5 on Packers.com today, you would understand that.
But Gabe, to your point,
yeah.
I'm looking at this group as a whole, and I do believe that Goody, on balance, because not everyone, they don't hit every single pick. That's an impossible standard.
Yep.
Ron Wolf is in the Hall of Fame, and his first-round picks, the Ross Verbas and the John Michaelses, even Craig Newsome, they weren't great first-round picks. He was unbelievable in the third round, which is not where Goody had been unbelievable. But, look, all of his misses that were high-profile picks, look, Jair Alexander was not a miss.
Nope.
But Eric Stokes was.
Yes.
Right? Which is why you have to sign Nate Hobbs. Second-round picks, Josh Myers played a lot of games for you, but clearly not well enough for you to want him on your team anymore. That's why you go out and sign Aaron Banks, so that's a miss. At running back, it's great that Aaron Jones was as productive as he was because he saved your bacon. Not on your major cheeseburger, though, because you don't have that. But A.J. Dillon was supposed to be your back of the future. You missed on him. Mm-hmm. That's why you signed Josh Jacobs. You missed on Darnell Savage. That's why you sign Xavier McKinney.
Right?
Now, what's great about Goody is that, unlike Ted, he uses free agency to fill in for his misses. But when you make picks that are on your team that you don't move on from, and they're still not home run swings like the two edge rushers, that's why the pressure is on both those guys this season.
I think that's really well said.
It's a good answer.
Yes, it was.
Good answer.
Good answer.
It's like the price. What is that?
Family Feud.
Family Feud.
Family Feud, indeed. If one guy on the defensive line reaches superstardom level this year, who is it? Rashawn Gary?
No, I think the ship sailed. Rashawn Gary is who he is. My best hope, I think, is Devontae Wyatt. I think he's the one who's flashed the most at this point. And obviously we'll get this with Quay Walker, they picked up the fifth-year option. Mm-hmm. So obviously they still have hope that what they saw last year, he can translate that into a more consistent season should he be able to stay healthy.
Kingsley Enagbare. He's my sneaky little guy that could get, because he's in a contract year too, I believe,
yes,
right?
That's correct.
A guy who gets kind of a lower-priced deal because he's having a really good start to the season. About two-thirds of the way through the year, he signs something, and he ends up being – him and Carl Brooks are the two guys
Carl Brooks.
That are guys that
Carl Brooks.
Aren't top 15 picks.
You don't make the playoffs without Carl Brooks last year.
That's true.
Carl Brooks' middle finger.
You're 0-6 in the NFC North without Carl Brooks.
Wow.
I don't want. You know what? I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, that's still bonkers to me. We will actually have to talk about that a bit later, though, Gabe. I hate to disappoint you.
Okay.